We are live. We are live on Second City Gridiron.
There it is.
This is exciting. This is exciting, Lester. We'll start the podcast later a little bit. Give people on the YouTube live to a little bit of time to come in, but this is going to be our first podcast on our own podcast channel.
Yes.
So this is exciting. We expanded. Now it was maybe more of a situation where we got kicked out of our apartment. But I'm excited about the new place, right? We got some new digs, so we're excited. It's one of those things where at first it was kind of like, what? Oh, yeah. I'm hurt. I feel bad. And then about 20 minutes later, I was like, actually, this is going to be good. We've already doing this stuff on YouTube. It'll be an easy transition for us. We'll talk about it a little bit on the podcast, not too much, but for those of you that do watch us on YouTube, we really appreciate that. We love you hanging out here on the video portion. We would love it if you have any kind of podcast presence, if you could go over and subscribe to that, just because as we get over to a new platform and we're reestablishing ourselves and we're going to need to go out and probably get our own sponsors and all that kind of stuff, those numbers help. So, if you want to help us out, if you don't do any podcasts, go subscribe anyway.
Yeah, what the hell?
Like, why not? Right? Just go find us. But we're up on everything. Apple always takes a little longer. They're kind of the last holdouts.
We're there now. We got it.
We're there now. Yeah. So it took a couple days, and we're up. So that's
Apple,
cool.
Spotify, those are the two big dogs. And then, of course, we're on iHeart, Amazon Music. I think there's another one there, but those are the big ones. We're on there. So find us. Our new brand is the same as our old brand, Second City Gridiron, 2ND, just like our video channel here. So yeah, we appreciate it. Even if you don't do the podcast thing, just subscribe. We got to juice those numbers because we're starting from square one. We lost all of the previous subs and follows from the previous pod channel, so we got to build it back up. So we appreciate the help.
I was looking on the old channel. I was actually running through shows because I put out a tweet and I said I had hosted over 250 shows over the last 5+ years, and it felt like a good estimate. But I hadn't really ground truthed it. I just didn't have time to do it. And so I was like, you know what? That's bothering me. I need to kind of go back and add them up. And I actually just cleared 250. It was like probably somewhere like on 255. And I was like, okay, I got it. I can stop counting. And so it's a lot. We have done a lot of shows. I have done a lot of shows with EJ. I've done a lot of shows with you. I've done some personal type, projects, history projects. I've done fantasy football. I've done betting. I've done some fan focused stuff. We've done camp reports. We've done, draft reports. We've done draft preview. We've done, draft pick profiles. I mean, just all of these different podcasts. And so it was just kind of like, there's a lot of reps, I'm ready to go with the new place. So just kind of cool to sit back and think like, yeah, okay, 250 episodes, but we're just getting started. That's how it feels. Like we're just kind of getting started. A new era is upon us here in the next month or so. So interesting timing that they would do this. It's not just us. Let me just emphasize, it's not because of us or our numbers or anything like that. We actually survived the performance cut last year. We were one of the very few NFL shows.
One of 8 NFL shows survived the initial cut from Vox Media, of course, SB Nation. They cut everybody except for like 8 of us. And we're like, okay, that's kind of cool. But having the video channel, we were ready to pivot, Right. And then like you were saying, when the news first came down, we're like, oh, what the heck? But then I'm like, dude, we're good, man. We were prepared for this. We're good to go. And now it's just a matter of getting those subs back up where we should be. So it's exciting.
Well, let's, if you're first time joining us, we do a little hang session up front, then we record a podcast, and afterwards we'll answer some questions. So if you have any questions, be nice to each other in the comments, but have any questions, feel free to throw them in there. We'll run back at the end of the show and we'll do that. But for now, let's record a podcast.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Bear and Balance. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined by the editor of that fine website, Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, the Chicago Bears are just a couple short weeks away from making the #1 pick in the NFL draft. Exciting times. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, this is I think we're finally starting to see Bears fans come to the realization of what's happening here. There are some holdouts. Obviously, they are still kind of upset, and they wanted certain different things to happen at the quarterback spot. But I think at this point, most people realize what's going on. And I didn't do a lot of digging in the tape of Caleb Williams before because I wanted to make sure, wait and see. And then like I started looking at some stuff, and the more you look into, the more you look at what he's done on the field, the more you look into his character, because that was the big question with some people. You realize this is going to be a fun time to be a Bears fan. Not everyone's on board, and that's fine. A lot of people they need to see it to believe it, but I'm ready, man. I can't wait for the draft and see what happens here with the Chicago Bears in 2024.
Let me just say that there's a moment in time where you think that a lot of us are, if you haven't experienced it yet, you will. But where it's like, am I old? Right? Do I not understand the references that are being made? Do I not understand, the clothes that are being worn by these young kids? Do I not understand? Like, at some point that'll come to you if it hasn't already. Right? There's plenty of you that are probably nodding your heads to what I'm saying. And yeah, there's a moment in time where these younger guys have done things where I'm like, I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't understand the references, right? So let's just say it. Caleb Williams painting his nails, that's different, right? Like that's not something I've seen on a football player. And then you learn, oh, his mom is a nail tech. He does it because of that. And you know what? It looks like a lot of these other guys are doing it too. It's not like it's just him. It's not like he's the only person in the world to have done this. Other people are doing it. Actors have done it for a long time. Rock stars have done it for. This guy's a celebrity, right? Like he's already a self-made man and a celebrity. Who cares? Like all I care about is how he plays quarterback. I don't care about painting nails, right? My teammates did weird stuff when I played, right? Like I remember a teammate that like would write his goals for the game on the tape that he taped up his wrist on, and he'd or he'd write F Jefferson, right? Like whatever, like he'd do that stuff. I don't know, like. Is it that weird that he had F Utah on his nails? Like you know what I mean? Like there's some stuff that is happening that I think has happened in football all the time. It's just being expressed in a different way.
Yeah.
And maybe it makes you feel a little old because it's something different and you're not used to seeing it. But as long as his teammates like him and as long as he plays good football, that's all we're going to cover. Like that's all that matters.
Yeah.
I think that this young man is going to be a celebrity. Like that's what I'm seeing is like he's very good at football. He was very good at college football. He has a Heisman Trophy that doesn't leave unless you're Reggie Bush, right? Like that doesn't leave you, right? Like that's already a legacy making defining feature, and now he wants to be legendary in the NFL, right? Now, obviously, he has to back it up, and he's putting those expectations on his shoulder and all that. But I kind of like the cockiness, the assuredness that's coming. Maybe it's cocky, maybe it's confidence, maybe it's both, that cocksuredness or whatever you want to call it, right? But I kind of like it. And the more that you get to listen to him and hear, and not what other people say and unsourced people say this about him, right? When you hear what he says, then when you hear what, say, Ryan Poles says about him in their meetings and all that, you're like, okay, he just seems like a mature, confident young man who knows what's possible.
Yeah, I mean the off-field stuff is one thing. The on-field stuff is exciting. Just the arm angle stuff, the arm strength, his ability to play within the structure, which is something that when the whole thing happened, we're like, oh my God, is this something he can do? He's just a highlight guy. And then we start seeing, a lot of the stuff where he's actually in structure. And then you start realizing why some of the stuff happened, while he was on the field. His defense was atrocious. I mean, in all his losses was like they gave up like 38 points a game, something like that. Just a ridiculous number. Just his defense was terrible. He lost some O-linemen, so he's playing with a really inexperienced group up front. So there was some hero ball stuff in there, but that's because that's kind of what he had to do. And now, did he learn some bad habits? Probably. I mean, that's kind of what happens with these guys, but that's up to Shane Waldron and the entire offensive staff to kind of get those kinks worked out and get him ready to play football in the National Football League.
Yeah, like for example, like what you're talking about. Where this show is not going to be all about Caleb Williams, but like it's fun to it's fun. We're going to get to
It
talk
is
about this
fun, man.
guy a
I'm
lot, right?
excited. Yeah.
But you know, one of the initial stats that you read, well, his time to throw was really high,
Yeah.
and these other quarterback prospects that come out with similar times to throw, like that is a real red flag for him, right? And then you match the stat to the tape, and you say like, well, really what he's doing is he's trying to buy time to throw downfield. He's not just sitting back, you know, and not moving off of his reads or anything like that. He was in constant pressure, right? Like I mean, so many times when you do watch him, he's under pressure before he hits his back foot, right? So he's trying to make a guy miss. But what I like about it and what I loved about previous quarterbacks, including Justin Fields, was when they were able to keep their eyes downfield, make a guy miss and deliver the ball. Those were my favorite highlights. And even if they were like 8-10 yard gains, those were my favorite highlights because that's what I love watching a quarterback do. Now, those highlights were not as frequent as I would have liked with Fields and previous quarterbacks, but you see that kind of playmaking all the time with Caleb Williams. He's buying time for himself to try to make a throw because he knows that that's the best way that he can get a chunk yardage play out of it, right? There's other quarterbacks, even in this draft, that they're under pressure, they're boom, they're going, they're going to run, their heads down, they're not looking to throw, right? And so that's a big difference. And so then that starts to explain some of those inflated time to throw numbers, right? So even the numbers where you might be concerned, a lot of those are explained away when you watch the tape. Maybe some of those hero ball things are like the higher fumble numbers. Um, that will be something he'll need to work on in the pros too. But it's not like it's because he has small hands or anything like that, right? There's not like a physical limitation. It is more about maybe how he's putting the ball away and trying to make a play, extend a play towards the end. So I think once you match the tape with the stats, it makes you even more encouraged than you were from just the hype machine.
Yeah, no, it's exciting time. There's a lot to like about Caleb Williams. It's not just like, I mean, there's a reason why he's everyone's consensus number one. I mean, people are expecting him to be, to be able to be, you hear the Mahomes comp, which is really unfair to anybody because he's possibly the greatest quarterback of all time when it's all said and done. So that's a ridiculous comp. I think some of those comps are because of the style of play, the arm angles he has, his ability to throw off structure. I think that's where those comps come from. I don't like hearing the comp because that's just not fair to him. Let him be himself. And he patterns his game after Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of interesting because, obviously Aaron Rodgers, he has owned the Bears. I mean, that's his thing. It's the belt, the discount double check. I mean, everything that you see with Aaron Rodgers, a lot of his mannerisms, you kind of see it in Caleb Williams. So, fingers crossed that this is the Bears version of a quarterback that good. That would be outstanding.
Well, let's get into this show. The show will be a little bit different, maybe, than ones that you've heard, because Lester and I are not draft experts. Like we're around the stuff. We watch some things, but we actually are more. We agree with the philosophy of let's watch these guys once they're drafted, as opposed to spending a ton of time trying to watch the entire class and maybe pick out your favorites. I do that a little bit, and then I get attached to guys, and the Bears rarely, if ever, draft them. Yeah. And so I have these like guys that I really wanted the Bears to draft sprinkled throughout the league because I get attached to them. And I blame EJ for a lot of that because he introduces me to these players that he knows I'll like. And then I just become attached. And then, Creed Humphrey is amazing, exactly like we thought. And he makes all pros at Kansas City, right? Yeah. So before we get into the show, though, I just want to mention a little bit about the changes with the podcast. So we were with SB Nation's podcast channel for a very long time. For me, over 5 years, for you, even just a little bit longer. They ended all of their podcasts. So they no longer have a podcast presence. So we are finding a new home. We rebranded our podcast channel to match our YouTube channel. So it's Second City Gridiron. And if you wouldn't mind, if you found us, if you're listening to the podcast, that means you found us. That's great.
You found us, yeah.
If you could hit subscribe, we never ask that, but because we're establishing a new home, it really helps us. So if you could hit subscribe, that helps us out a lot. For those of you that like to join us on YouTube, we talked at the front of the show before we started recording the podcast. If you could hit subscribe, that helps us a lot. If I don't know if you find this random clip on Twitter, please go help us out and subscribe. Just an early try to push to try to get some subscriptions over to the new home. It just helps us out. It'll help us, buy some curtains for the new home. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
That would be great.
I mean, we're still, obviously we both still write for SB Nation. We're still Windy City Gridiron. It's still what we do there, but now we just like our video. We have an independent place to kind of share our audio thoughts as well as our video thoughts. And, you'll still find the pod and the video on the site because, they're cool like that. They don't care. We promote ourselves. So, it's just a different, a small change, but really not really because we're still doing the same thing we've always done. So
it's an amicable split, I
Yes.
believe they call
We're
it.
good.
It was not anything where, and we get to keep our show names and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's probably not going to look anything different than you. For you guys, it'll just be in a different place, under a different name. We'll put it
Different
that way.
logo.
Still at the same
No big
place,
deal. Yeah.
Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But yeah, give us a sub. That'd be great. All right. Big giveaway. We have Jack Silverstein's new book. This is very exciting. So Jack and I have talked about writing for a long time. Jack's obviously the site historian at Windy City Gridiron. We've had podcasts specific with Jack on to talk about different things. You had him on talk about the book.
Yeah.
And so we got a signed copy that we are going to give away to a listener. So how do you want to do this, Lester? You have the physical copy, so you'll be the one mailing that out.
Yes.
But how do you want to do this? How can people enter for a chance to win?
So it's probably going to go to someone here in the YouTube watching. So it's a quick question. It's honor of one of Jack's favorite Bears, a classic number 88 for Chicago Bears. So if you're in the YouTube channel now watching, I want you to put in the comment the number 88 for the Chicago Bears that has the most receptions, but also the number 88 that has the most receiving yards. There's two different players. They both wore 88. One of the 88s has the most yards in that number. One of the 88s has the most receptions in that number. Give me both players. The first one that does it in the YouTube chat here will get a copy of the book.
Oh, exciting stuff. All right. So sorry about that for podcast listeners. We'll get you something somewhere down the line.
If no one gets the answer correct in the YouTube channel, then if you're on the podcast listening, send us an email with your answer to 2ndcitygridiron@gmail.com. And then we'll enter you there.
And we have done giveaways in the past. We had a whole year where we gave away Portillo's, which I was just at not too long ago.
Okay.
And I posted a picture. I ordered the Maxwell Polish sausage, and it came with hot dog toppings. It came with Chicago dog toppings. It was very weird.
Yeah. Someone made a mistake. I saw that on your Twitter.
I mean, I ate it.
It's good. It's still good.
It was fine.
It's fine.
Yeah. All right. So here's the premise for the show. And I don't know how long this will go, but I don't want to talk about specific players necessarily. I want to talk about what happened to the team build. If Ryan Poles is sitting there at pick 9, he's already got Caleb Williams at 101. He's sitting there at pick 9, and trade down's not an option. Everybody loves the idea of trading down because we've gotten into that mode where we're trying to accumulate more capital, right? We're trying to accumulate more capital. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that that's what Ryan Poles wants to do because every draft has a number of blue chip players, and that would change depending on who you ask. Different teams are going to have different blue chip players, but in general, there's a consensus of a number of blue chip players in every draft. Now they're not the first players to always get drafted, of course, because quarterbacks get pushed up the board a lot, pushed up half a round, a full round, whatever it is, because it's quarterback. It's the most important position. And then you start to get other, position premiums like defensive ends and offensive tackles. They may go a little higher than say like a running back or a blue chip linebacker or something like that. Yes. All of those things are true, but in general, every draft is going to have, a finite number of blue chip players. And these are players that I think have a high floor and a really high ceiling. These are guys that you think that could be all pros. And some drafts might have 3 or 4 of them. Some drafts might have 12, right? Like that's just kind of how it is. And so when you're at pick 9 and you're in a draft where it's a good quarterback draft, meaning that that there's going to be a number of quarterbacks are going to be taken before that 9th pick, you're in an interesting position where you're likely to get one of those blue chip players. But if you trade down, if you trade out of that position, do you have an opportunity to take one of those blue chip players anymore? And I'm just going to put this out there, Lester, and I want you to respond to me with what I'm going to say. If Caleb Williams is who we think he is, and the Bears team build is at where we think it is, this could be the last top 10 pick the Bears have in quite some time. So if that's the case, do you want to take a blue chip player, or do you want to try to trade out and maybe get another player in the second round or later on, just because you think you want more draft capital? So I philosophically, I want to ask you that question.
Yeah, it's a good question because, the Bears won, 7 games last year, and they probably could have won more. The coach Flus effect had a problem with like 3 games last year. So hopefully he learned his lesson. And the Bears are in a different place now with a little more aggressive coach Flus. But yeah, if Caleb Williams is who people think he is, and the team is Montez Sweat and TJ Edwards and all these guys, are built up where we think they are. Yeah, they may not be picking top 10 again for a while, hopefully. So yeah, if you have a chance to sit there at 9 and someone that's high on your board is sitting there that the Bears have as their blue chipper, I think you got to take the guy. BPA, no matter what it is. I know Ryan Poles has discussed that he's going to have his scouting staff looking at receiver, edge, and offensive tackle, because those are where the blue chip talent seems to be sitting in this draft. So if one of those guys are sitting there, we're talking receiver now. So if it's Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., those are the 3 consensus top 3. If one of those guys are there at 9, I think you got to pull the trigger, and that's who you got to take.
Yeah. So the premise of these 3 categories here that we'll talk about is, let's just talk about wide receiver first. So you name the 3. Most people would agree that those 3 are blue chip players. I've heard that on most people's boards that say Rome Odunze is their 3rd rated player. Some people like Malik Neighbors more than they like Marvin Harrison Jr. They're different flavors of player, right? So there's that, where you get into preference. But I think most evaluators would agree that those are 3 blue chip talents. Maybe somebody doesn't like Odunze and they'd say, no, he's more of a red, whatever. But most people are having them as blue chip talents. And so if the Bears at pick 9 have one of those 3 players available and they pick a wide receiver, what does that do for the current roster situation, adding a player like Rome Odunze to that wide receiver room?
For me, it's Odunze's the guy I think would fit the most on this team, because DJ Moore kind of plays your Z. He's the guy you move around a bit. Keenan Allen, who the Bears just acquired, he's your slot. He really thrives there. And Odunze's the guy who's your X. So yeah, I think if Odunze's the pick, he would be a great fit there. You got to look at the roster construction overall. Keenan Allen is in his final year of his contract. I think he may want to wait and see how good Caleb Williams is before he decides where he wants to play, beyond this year. DJ Moore's due new paper in a couple years as well. So do you want to have a guy like that you come in and now you may have to have 3 guys making significant money? I think it's a good problem to have if you have too many receivers, especially in this day and age. It's a passing league. The Bears, if they have the talent, they'll run a lot of 3 receiver sets. The nice thing about Shane Waldron is during his time in Seattle, he was there 3 years. We hear a lot of people talk about how last year used a lot of 3 tight end sets, a lot of 2 tight end sets. He also used a lot of 3 receiver sets. Going back to his first year in Seattle, he was really heavy with the run. A lot of stuff with just, one tailback. But then as he kind of went on through his time based on talent, he kind of split up and he kind of did more of a tandem back there. So from what I've seen from Waldron's personnel decisions that he's done throughout his career calling plays, he's flexible. So if it's Odunze, I think he'll work him in. If he pivots and goes a different direction, let's say all 3 receivers are gone and you got to go in another direction, I think the Bears are set up to pivot and do whatever is best for the team.
So the way that I see this is that if the Bears do take a wide receiver at 9, what that's saying is that maybe not what it's saying. It may be saying like, this is a blue chip player. This is the last guy on our board of those three positions. Like we really are we love it. But what it does is I think it gives you some really good leverage with the Keenan Allen situation. Keenan Allen may not want to play. I mean, he got traded, right? Like he may not want to play in Chicago in the final years of his career. He may not want to sign an extension. We don't know. He said, we wouldn't be here if I didn't want to sign an extension. But like you said, he may be waiting to see what that chemistry looks like. He may want to test the waters one last time in his career. Like, you don't know, right? So if what it does is I think it gives you some pretty good insurance that, hey, if Keenan Allen doesn't want back, you have DJ Moore that you can then extend, because next year he would be eligible to extend some money in years onto his contract. And then you have a cost-controlled rookie contract. Even if it's a lot of money for a rookie, it's still a cost-controlled rookie contract for 5 years, right? So I think it's interesting because it gives you some maximum flexibility in the wide receiver room. And then plus, like, that player, let's say it's a Dunza, doesn't have to produce right away.
Yeah.
And so a top 10 wide receiver may come with a lot of expectations and may be able to show out. But if those guys struggle out of the gate, the expectations are not as high because he has two world-class wide receivers that are on the team already soaking up targets. So it's not actually, it's actually a great situation, I think, for a wide receiver because the expectations are pretty low. So I mean, I've kind of talked myself into this being my top option. And I know it's a deep wide, like logically as a deep wide receiver draft, like the people are talking about how much they really like the guys in the later first round or even the second and third round. Like people really like this wide receiver class, but I guess I'm a little bit worried about missing out on a wide receiver run, particularly if during the gap between picks of pick 9 and 75, right? And so there's just a little bit of a history here with pulls early in wide receivers and missing out on some players and missing out on some runs and then reaching a little bit to try to, oh shoot, like I have to make sure I make a pick here. And this would just be maybe overcorrecting, you could argue, but I like it because it's super modern NFL thinking. Yeah. And it's really supporting your quarterback with the premium weapons that, I mean, no one could criticize, right, Poles, for saying you didn't give Caleb Williams enough to succeed.
We kind of saw the same situation play out last year with Seattle and Shane Waldron. They drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, and there was something that made the media rounds. I think he might have been at the Super Bowl, and he wasn't very happy. He didn't really diss Shane Waldron, so to speak. He just kind of didn't really give him a vote of confidence, and that's part of because he was the rookie receiver last year, third on the depth chart, because the Seattle Seahawks have Metcalf and Lockett. So, he was number 3 clearly, which is what Rome would be number 3 clearly. But he had 63 catches as a rookie.
You're right.
Why is he complaining here at this point? As a rookie, having those many catches, Lockett's getting up there. At some point, they'll flip and he'll be number 2. So Shane Waldron can make it work. That's why, like I said, if it's a receiver, I really like Adunes. I think he just would fit in perfectly, and it just really would open up this offense. Plus, having your rookie quarterback with a rookie receiver, same draft, letting those guys grow and build together, I think that's just a good opportunity.
And I know it wasn't the same draft, but giving Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, who obviously they had a connection in college, but giving Jamar Chase to Joe Burrow really helped him take off. Burrow showed out in his first year and then he got hurt. Like, I know the history, it's a little different, but I think that there was a bit of a trend of drafting a first round wide receiver for your young quarterback, a few years ago. And you see some of these like really successful teams, they have a couple of like high level wide receivers for their young quarterback. And I know people, hey, Kansas City just won a Super Bowl with no wide receivers. Yeah, because Mahomes is developed, right? For a while, they had Kelsey and they had Tyreek Hill. So he had 2 like fantastic pass catchers. I mean, honestly, at this point, Hill and definitely Kelsey is a Hall of Famer. Hill might be, right? And so that really helped Mahomes develop into Mahomes. And so, I'm try not to compare the two, but you know, I get those things thrown back at you, and it's like, well, yeah, but you got to remember where he started from. You got to remember he had two elite pass catchers with him, and so I think giving Williams more weaponry to work with is a really good idea. And I'm an offensive line, defensive line guy, so this is like weird
Same.
place to
Yeah.
be, right? And like this is my preferred method. And then we're going to talk about tackle and defensive line after the break. But I think you have a rare opportunity. You potentially have a rare opportunity if one of those guys is on the board at 9 to really set up Williams for success in the long term.
Yeah.
All right, quick break on the other side of it here. We'll talk about if the Bears take a tackle at 9 and if the Bears take a defensive lineman at 9. Stick with us.
While we're in the break here, Matthew over there on YouTube, he got the answer right for the Des Clark. He has the most receptions. Marcus Robinson has the most yards as number 88. So if you are on Twitter, you shoot me a DM with your address, Matthew. If you're not on Twitter, then shoot me an email to secondcitygridiron@gmail.com.
2ND City Gridiron.
2ND, and we'll get that book sent out to you.
And I took a break out of habit, but we don't have to do that for a while.
We don't. Yeah, we don't have any sponsors yet. So if you guys,
there you go.
If you guys are looking to sponsor a podcast,
you guys work for a company and or you're a realtor or something, let us know. We're available. All right, let's get back into it. So Lester, let's talk about what if the Bears are on the clock at 9, they have to stick and pick, and they decide to take an offensive tackle. What does that do to the team build?
I'm a big Braxton Jones fan, so I like what he did as a rookie. I like how he kind of overcame some early issues as a sophomore. Came back from the injury, had a nice strong finish to the season. I like him as a prospect still. But if Joe Alt's sitting there at 9, for example, Notre Dame, how do you pass that up? I mean, that would be tough. I mean, this guy has Pro Bowl upside. We talk about ceiling floor. His floor is going to be, this guy's going to be a good starter in the NFL. I mean, that's what all the experts say, all the analysts say. So yeah, it's I think if you do this, if you go offensive tackle, you go left tackle there. Some people say you have to trade Braxton Jones, but do you though? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the best bet. I mean, if you want to maximize what you get for him, possibly, but why get rid of another good football player? If you draft a better football player, then you keep both.
So this is interesting because you could make the argument that for 2024, for the year 2024, drafting Joe Alt or an offensive tackle to presumably replace Braxton Jones at left tackle is marginally the lowest impact move that you could make.
Yeah.
Because you already, what you have in Braxton Jones. And if anybody is going to be number one fan of Braxton Jones, it's going to be Ryan Poles. Right. And this is Ryan Poles can brag. This is the look at me. I'm an offensive line guy. I told you I was an offensive line guy, and look what I've done. Right. And so I find this to be a fascinating question because really what you might be saying is, I don't know that I'll ever have a chance to pick a left tackle this high again. And I'm looking a couple years down the road. Do I think Braxton Jones is good enough to pay big time left tackle money? Am I going to be able to sign him in a couple years when I need to? Right. He wasn't a first round pick. So, he's got 2 more years left on that rookie salary. So is he good enough to re-sign in year 5 at like a high enough money dollar amount? Or do I take this premium blue chip player as a first rounder, pair him with my franchise quarterback, and there you go, right? I'm protecting the blind side. I've got Darnell Wright on the right side. I've got my bookend tackles for the foreseeable future. I've protected this asset that I've taken 101. I've done everything I can. I've got 2 professional, great wide receivers. And, what more could you ask from me? I've got 2 good pass catchers at the tight end position, right? Like I've already got enough weapon. I've got a back out of the backfield.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift, that is a weapon as a receiver out of the backfield. What more could you want? I'm protecting my resource. So the question that you brought up, do you trade Braxton Jones? And so let's assume that happens. Let's assume that's what Ryan Poles wants to do, and he just cannot resist taking a potential franchise left tackle with that pick 9. Would you trade Braxton Jones? What would it take for you to trade Braxton Jones? Or what is he worth to you as a guy that, you're making sure that pick 9 is ready to take over, and 2, serving as the swing tackle for you, on the depth chart in case one of those guys misses time?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at what the value is. I mean, he was a 5th-round pick, obviously. So if you keep him, or if you decide to trade him, what are you going to get? I mean, is there some value there? Obviously, around the league, probably. But I think he means more to the Bears than he would to another team via a trade. Maybe you get a 5th back for him. Maybe a 4th. I mean, I'm not sure what the value is to another team looking for a starting quality left tackle, because I mean, yeah, he had some nice grades per PFF and some of the other grading services, but he wasn't elite in any of those categories. He was like, middle of the road in some areas. So I think you have to look at the value of it and then keeping him, because as your swing, if he can play, I'm not sure if he can play the right side. Who knows? I mean, he was always a left tackle at Utah State. He's always been a left tackle for the Bears. We'll kind of wait and see. But then you got to look at the player. I mean, is he a guy that would be a distraction if he's benched all of a sudden? Or will he be just a team guy and do whatever is asked of him? You know what I mean? So to me, I'm keeping him. I think he'll be fine to keep, and then he'll play. I mean, it's not like he's not going to get on the field. I mean, the odds of your guys getting hurt on the offensive line, it happens. It's rare that a guy plays, the entire season, consecutively, especially if he is your swing. He plays. He's relatively cheap, being a 5th-round pick. If he plays 2 years for you in Chicago, then you know what? Then he walks as a free agent. Maybe at that point you're at a situation as a franchise where now these comp picks matter. The Bears haven't been able to get many comps because they're always signing guys all the time. But in a couple years down the road, when Braxton Jones is a free agent, will your roster be in a better place to where now when he walks, maybe now you can get a comp pick back for that? I think you have to weigh that. Is the trade now going to be better than a potential comp pick 2 years down the road?
Now, one of our colleagues has suggested that Braxton Jones might be worth a day 2 pick because he's a guy that's too good to be a swing tackle, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a premium that the Bears don't necessarily need to have, and that would be more useful to be a starter on another roster. So let's just say hypothetically that our colleague is correct and that he is worth a late 2, early 3 in this draft, not future draft, which is a different situation.
Yeah.
But let's say that that's part of the calculus. Let's say that Ryan Poles has had conversations with Kansas City. Let's say he's had conversations with other teams that may be interested in cost controlled, like, teams that are up against the cap, right? Cost controlled talent along the offensive line, and said, we're looking to add more young talent at a different position. If we end up going at tackle at 9, we would, be replacing Braxton. We would be potentially looking to move him for your late 2nd pick, your early 3rd round pick. Would that move you off your spot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that does change what you're looking at here, because now you could possibly get another potential guy. Now maybe center's back in play for you if you get another a 2nd round pick, or if you even get a 3rd round pick, because some centers slip. I'm not sure you get the top center on the board or even the top 2 centers on the board, but at this point, maybe there's a center now that's sitting there waiting for you. So yeah, I mean, if you can leverage Braxton Jones into a pick that early, where you can now also bolster your center position possibly, or your line in general. Yeah, I think at that point, as much as I'm a fan of Braxton Jones, I mean, that's the business of the NFL. I mean, you have to do what's best for the franchise. So if Poles can get something that early, yeah, I think that's something that has to happen.
And this is it's all hypothetical,
All
right? Like we
hypothetical,
don't
yeah.
know anything about anything. I'm just it's something that has been floated as a fun hypothetical to work through.
Yeah.
And my initial reaction was the same as yours. No, I'll take him as a swing. And
Yep.
even though I don't know if he can play right tackle, he certainly is not going to play right tackle in the way that Darnell Wright plays right tackle. They are
Yeah.
just physically different people, right? Like that's not going to be the style of play. But could he fill in at the right? Or could your rookie, let's say you get into camp and the guy that you draft as a rookie, could that guy then start at right tackle if Darnell has to miss some time and you keep Braxton on the left? Like, again, the flip flop thing isn't always great, but the great ones are able to do it generally. So just, putting that out there. All right, let's again, normally I'm like all about drafting offensive linemen,
Yeah.
right? But again, this like it's just a little bit lower immediate value for me because it's not filling an obvious roster spot. There's not like there's not a clear hole path to snaps, or you're displacing someone who I think is pretty decent. And as a wide receiver, there's a real path to snaps. So, whoever is going to play wide receiver 3 in this offense is going to have an ability to play a number of snaps here. So let's move on to it's pick 9. Bears are on the board. Some quarterbacks have been taken. All the wide receivers are gone. Joe Alt's gone, right? And the Bears turn in the pick. They stick and pick, and they take a defensive lineman. Now, I put defensive lineman here, right? Because there could be the potential that Poles and Eberflus are in love with the 3
Yeah.
technique, right? I just want to we talked about edge, defensive end as the obvious pick here to go on the opposite end of Montez Sweat, but then the way that they talk about 3 technique in this defense is like nothing matters if you don't have that. So
It's the engine of the whole defense.
it's the engine, right? So I put in defensive line, not just edge. So if the Bears turn in the card and it's a defensive lineman, what does that do to this roster build?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at obvious needs, you would think that defensive line is much higher than receiver or offensive tackle. So, Ryan Poles said he's going to have his 3 scouting team look at those 3 positions. Edge, is probably the one you need the most, but like you said, 3 tech. I mean, is Jervon Dexter? Is he going to take a jump? I think it's possible, but who knows at this point? I mean, but even if he does take a jump, you still need another guy down there. You lost Justin Jones, who took a lot of reps last year. You brought back Billings, you got Zach Pickens, but the Bears are 4. They're 4 deep at both edge and D tackle. They're going to play all 8 guys. They want to rotate them, keep everyone fresh. So you need another guy there, whether it's at 3 tech or off the edge. So yeah, I mean, I think if you stick at 9, I think the question now becomes: is there good value there in taking a defensive end or a defensive tackle? I mean, that's where now you get into the point where is it better to trade back if there's someone there? If you can't find a trade partner, or even Ryan Poles said, it takes 2 to tango. I know as fans we say, "Oh, just trade back." It's not always that easy. A team has to want to come up for something. So if Ryan Poles is there, if the receivers are gone, if Joe Alt is gone, the next highest player on his board is probably going to be a defensive lineman. Then I think you got to take him there. I think while I would rather a trade back, again, it may not happen. So it could be Dallas Turner, it could be Jared Verse, it could be Murphy from Texas, the 3 tech. Who knows how they have their board stacked. It's a good scenario to kind of play through.
So I will say this: there's usually like 32 fan bases at this point in following the draft that are like, we'll trade back, right?
Yeah.
It's very rare to hear a fan trade up and get that guy, right? I mean, quarterback not being being the only difference maker here. One team has to start a run, right? Like that's kind of how it works. And if you're sitting there and all of the offensive players, which it just feels so fantasy football to me, where it's like, well, all these quarterbacks are going to go and all these wide receivers are going to go, and then this offensive lineman, and then all the defensive players are going to be there. And it's like, I don't know. Like maybe that's what'll end up happening, but it just seems so weird to me that would be the case. It's just such a lopsided talent pool that the offensive players would just dominate like 8 picks, and then the Bears would be like, "Oh, okay, I have all the defensive players to choose from." Sure, I would be shocked if Atlanta doesn't take a defensive player at 8. That's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm also would be shocked if the Titans don't take an offensive tackle
Yeah.
the pick before, but like I could be wrong, right? I could dive into those those team builds a little bit more and understand where they could go. But let's say that they do take this defensive lineman. What that tells me is like it's a little bit of you have a defensive head coach. Like you have a defensive head coach. He needs another player. He wants to play a certain style. He would love to get home with 4, right? Like that's clearly what he showed us early on is that he would love to just rush 4, drop back and play coverage with what again is a very talented secondary.
Yeah.
And but it's only going to work if you can get home with those 4. So you need somebody besides Montez Sweat. I mean, we both really love Billings. Billings isn't there to get 10 sacks. Like he's there to stop the run, right? And so, are you going to add another defensive end? To me, it makes the most sense from what we know about Matt Eberflus, what we know about Ryan Poles. It's just like, yeah, this makes sense. This could be the pick. And there's a clear path to playing time.
Yeah.
No one's going to block you, right? Like no one, people will try to block this person, but like no one's going to block you to snaps, right? Then you're going to have a pathway to snaps. So in a lot of ways for 2024, even though defensive ends sometimes take a little while to learn the NFL game and to be able to adapt and survive and have a lot of that counter move stuff when you get into with rookies, they don't really have it. They've got one really great tool, but they don't maybe have a counter. They don't have a secondary tool developed, right? It's like a pitcher. It's got like a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, but doesn't have anything off speed, right? So those things come with time, but I think you could really make the argument that for 2024, that would be the most impact that you could see on the defensive line if you added on the defensive line. And when else are you going to be able to add a premium player at that position, right? If you're not picking that high, like they just don't come on the market very often. You were able to get one via trade, but it's not like guys like that are open in free agency very much. And then when they are, like Christian Wilkins, they require a Brinks truck to be able to sign, which we're not sure the Bears can do, right? We're not sure that they have that ability when it comes to cash needs. So this may be the most logical spot for the Bears to take is a defensive lineman for their long-term roster build.
Yeah, you mentioned that the path to playing time is there because you have Sweat on one side. You have DeMarcus Walker, who's a good football player.
Good football player. Yep, he's a professional football player.
But I like him as your guy that kind of bounce around the line, give you some reps at tackle on occasion, depending on the matchup. Now you're rushing off the edge. We kind of saw him do that. And then when Yannick Ngakoue got hurt last year, he kind of stepped up and played pretty good footballs. But again, he's a guy that you can replace on third down situations, if it's a speed rusher, if it's a pass rusher. These rookies coming in, I mean, that's what they're going to come in to do, get after the quarterback. And there's some guys that are on the board at 9 that they're probably going to take. And like we said, this is the Bears' biggest need, because I would argue you don't also need a defensive end 3. You need a defensive end 4, because right now on your roster it's Khalid Kareem, it's Jacob Martin, who they just signed from the Colts, another backup, and it's Dominique Robinson. I mean, these are your 3 guys that are vying for that DE4 spot if you get a guy early. So you need probably 2 more edges. And then we haven't talked about defensive tackle. You need another defensive tackle. So whatever you do here, this guy's going to play a lot for your team.
This is my brain pick, right? My brain, everything football logic tells me that this is where they're going to go. Is they're gonna take their quarterback at 1, and they're gonna take a defensive end at 9, assuming they stick and pick. Now, if they trade back, I think it's because they trade back and they feel like there's a bubble again of defensive linemen that they like, and they're gonna count on one of these later wide receivers, and then they'll bring them along slower because they can, right? The football logic in me says that's what they're going to do. Why wouldn't it, right? You take your defensive lineman at 9 or in the teens with a trade back, and then you take in this deeper talent pool for wide receiver, you're going to take one of those guys later. You're going to take a later round wide receiver. And you're going to add them into wide receiver 3, and then you're going to take another developmental defensive lineman, or maybe Lester, we get our center finally on this roster, right? But you have 2. You signed a center in free agency, and you made the trade for Ryan Bates, who they clearly love. Yeah. They clearly love that guy, right? He's finally playing under the contract that he signed, that Ryan Poles tried to sign him to a couple years ago, right? And so they may think that they already have center taken care of, and they don't want to pair a rookie center with a rookie quarterback. And I can understand that.
Understandable for sure.
So to me, the football logic in this, so if I had to make a bet, you say, hey, you got to put $100 down. What are the Bears going to do? I'm telling you that they're sticking at 9. What are they going to do? My $100 goes on the defensive line. That's where my brain is.
Is that with one of the receivers falling?
I mean, it would just tear my heart out.
Yeah,
because it would be tough to move. But I think that I would still put the money there. If you have to put the money before the draft, what is going to happen? This is where I'd put my money, because football logic wise, I think that's where they go.
It's such a fascinating place to be at 9, because there's a chance where it's 4 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, Joe Alt, and now you are sitting there with the best defensive guy on your board. But again, is that the best value to take him if you can't find a trade back partner? I mean, if you're forced to stay there, obviously you're going to have to do it that way. But also we could see a situation where maybe only 3 quarterbacks go early, and now a team's looking to really kind of get up and make a trade with you at 9 because they want to get that 4th quarterback. So it's a fascinating place to be in. You know, most scenarios play out to where it looks good for the Bears, but there's a few where you're like, who knows here? And then of course, again, we talk about, is it a tackle? You know, I mean, there has to be a reason why Ryan Poles put his 3 scouting teams together. It's not just because of Joe Alt. I'm imagining they like a couple other tackles in this draft, and there's been a few other tackles talked about going early. I know there's been some buzz where the Chargers are pretty hot and heavy on. He's the right tackle. His name escapes me. I can't pronounce him anyway. I'm terrible with names. But there are other tackles that are going to possibly sneak into this top 10. It all depends how the board falls.
It would be so Jim Harbaugh to take a tackle.
Exactly. Yeah.
To lose both of his wide receivers, and have Justin Herbert, who's amazing talent at quarterback, and be like, yeah, we're gonna draft a tackle.
Chargers also lost their tight end too.
We're gonna run the football here. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah,
I'm Jim Harbaugh. We're gonna run the football.
No passing in the second half. We're just gonna run.
Here's an interesting question scenario that we're just having fun here. You're sitting at 9. You're the Bears, and the draft falls that the top 3 quarterbacks go, which it's Caleb. The Bears take Caleb, and then some order of Drake May and Jaden Daniels, right? Like that's depending on who you talk to, you'll get very passionate answers. Going, and as a Bears fan, who cares?
Yeah,
who cares? Doesn't matter, right? So let's say that's those 3 are off the board, and JJ McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, who's a winner. He's a winner, right? He's still there. Like that's the scenario you're talking about, where there may be a motivated team to trade up. We know the Vikings are motivated to try to get up to get a quarterback. Now we've kind of thought that they wouldn't mind a guy like JJ McCarthy. It kind of fits. Like he kind of looks like he could probably fit pretty well with Kevin O'Connell up there. Let's say the Bears are there. The Vikings are motivated. They're trying to get some value to trade up. They feel pretty good, but the Titans told them no. The Falcons told them no. Now you're sitting on the board. Are you motivated to trade down with the Raiders to trade him out of the conference and make the Vikings try to take the next quarterback on the list who there's a big drop off there, right? Like, is there some game theory that starts to play here where it's like, I'm gonna, it's kind of F the dealer, right? Like I'm gonna screw you over, and I'm willing to maybe trade back for lesser capital, but I want to control where this guy's going, and he's not going to Minnesota.
Well, the other part of this is where does your scouting staff have JT McCarthy graded?
Right.
Maybe you feel, hey, let's stick him in Minnesota. We don't believe in his future as an NFL quarterback.
I love that.
Maybe that's something that you play here. Now you can not only put him in division, But now you can kind of do the NFC North tax and say, look, Minnesota, we don't want to trade with you, but if you want your guy, you got to throw in an extra sweetener with us and an extra, extra third round pick in 2025 on top of what you're already offering us, because we're trading within division. There's a lot. Again, I've always loved the draft. I'm not as deep into the prospect as I used to. When I was younger, man, I knew all the prospects. I knew everybody. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more into the scenarios, the strategy of what teams are doing. Why are they giving up this much for this? I just watched Draft Day yesterday for the second time. I just out of the blue, I'm like, let's throw this stupid movie on and see what's going on here.
It is a stupid movie.
It's such a stupid movie, but it's a fascinating. You're like, oh my god, that would never happen. But those weird things happen where you never know. It's like, so yeah, the strategy of it's intriguing. Someone's going to come up and get the quarterbacks. It is what happened. We just did the SB Nation mock. We're in the middle of it now. I just made my pick for the Bears. Of course, I went Caleb. At 9, I had my pick of defensive players. I found someone to trade back with. The Raiders did jump up. The Raiders came up and got their quarterback. So I was at 12. I put that on the market as well. I couldn't find any takers. So I went ahead and took Dallas Turner at 12. So it's like I moved back, got an additional pick. Still got an edge that I probably would have took at 9. So
everybody's going to love that. You're going to win.
I am.
The fan base is going to love what you did. So
exactly. That's all.
Well, I think there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And I agree with you. I'm into the butterfly effect. I'm into the sliding doors, like all those things where it's like, well, that team wanted to do this, but they missed out. There's entire careers are made. Some of them are broke by where they go, right? Because they just go to the wrong team and they just never start off right. The Bears fans know, Aaron Donald, who just retired, right? That guy was clearly going to be a Chicago Bear if he was just there for one more pick. Right? And here he is, probably the greatest or one of the greatest defensive linemen of all time. And just retired recently. Could have been an amazing guy to cheer for and would have changed the trajectory of the franchise because he's that good of a player, right? So the draft is interesting and meaningful, and it's fun to be able to study it and look back and kind of play these scenarios. That's the stuff that I like. The specific players, we have guys for that, right? Make sure you're following EJ, make sure you're following Jacob, make sure you're following, Mason, it does a lot of mocks on his show. So, make sure you're following that. Taylor's doing some great stuff with interviewing a lot of these, coaches and people that are around some of these prospects that potentially could be Bears. So if you want to learn more about the person she's doing, I don't know where else you're getting that. She's doing some very unique stuff. So make sure that you're checking
her latest Making Monsters just dropped this morning. We actually put it on YouTube as well. It's audio only, but it's on YouTube as well. So whether you're on the podcast side of things or on the video side of things, she just interviewed the names escape me, but it's one of the beat writers that covered the Oregon Ducks, and also it covers the Washington Huskies. Sure, she learned a lot about those prospects that could be there at 9 or beyond for the Bears that play for the Ducks or the Huskies.
There's a center prospect there.
There is a center. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to wrap up the podcast. For those of you that are on the YouTube, we'll hang out. And again, if you found us on the podcast, thank you. And one last time, we won't say it that much, but just hit the subscribe button. That'll help us out a lot. Really appreciate you finding us there. And until next time, bear down. All right. What do we got, Lester?
Chris had a good point here. It's about the fact that Flus is still in town. That was where we were both at, and when the season ended, we're like, look, if they're going to go quarterback, they got to move on from Flus and line him up. But it didn't happen, but I think we got the next best thing. They put a ton of money in the offensive coaches. So that tells me that Flus is not in a win now mode. That was the big fear. Oh God, he's in his lame duck year. He has to win or else. We're still talking the Bears at the end of the day. They're not as cheap as the throw around nickels like manhole cover days. They're still a pretty frugal franchise. So I cannot see them unless there's a drastic 2-win season here. Unless it's something that's just terrible. they're not firing Flus. He's here for a year. Waldron and his entire offensive staff just got big money for offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. There's 3 quarterback coaches on this roster, on this coaching staff. They're prepared to build it up around Caleb Williams, and I think they're in for the long haul. So once I came to grips with that, Flus is here. Please learn from your mistakes. We've seen it happen. Bill Belichick was not a good coach his first time around. We've seen other coaches kind of figure it out as the years progress. So I hope Flus can figure it out. And if he does, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, we were both very much like, okay, like fire this guy in season. I know you'll never do it.
Get rid of his
But,
ass, yeah.
I mean, like the collapses, the internal turmoil, which like I get it. I get like you're saying, well, there's somebody else, right? He hired those guys. Like, it was tough. But for me, the things that really bother me about any coach are like, this is how I coach. This is my system. I'm not going to bend based on the players. I'm just going to call my thing. Right.
That was Getsy.
It was Getsy, and it was like, it was both sides. Like, it was like, I'm losing my mind. Right. And that was what was frustrating. And then you started to see him get a little bit more creative once he had the controls, right? The first couple of weeks, it wasn't like he changed, but you started to see a little bit more creativity up front, a little more creativity, bringing pressure. And then it seemed like it did back off at the end of the year a little bit. Like, it seemed like he got to the point where he was like, I'm going to do less of that again, because I think he really does have a preference. But I think coaching needs to continually evolve. I think you need to push yourself. Like, if you're not on the cutting edge, like, you're probably too far behind and you're not going to be able to recover. So you need to be, studying these other teams that are, bringing exotic pressures, or understanding how to like make quarterbacks uncomfortable, or like, it just didn't feel like there was specific game plans a lot of times. And that's pretty frustrating. Like, I like a coach. This is why I'm obsessed with Bill Belichick and his history, because he will completely change his defense to try to beat an opponent. I mean, did you end up watching that documentary series?
I haven't got through it all yet. I just started it, but I'm like really early into it. Yeah.
They do him a little dirty in that. Like, and it's because of the way he answers all of the questions. Like, he's such a curmudgeon. So he didn't do himself any favors, but then they like piled on. But it was very interesting how they covered that Rams Super Bowl, which Bears fans are very familiar with, because Vic Fangio really laid out the blueprint on how to stop the Rams that year, right? And he completely changed he didn't run that defense at all. And then in 2 weeks, he installs it and runs basically what Fangio showed the world of what the blueprint was in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he shuts them down. Right. Like, he's willing to do that. And I love a coach that can say like, all right, like, what, maybe not completely revamp, because you got to teach a whole new thing. I get that. But like, what can I add in that is going to give me an advantage this week? And what's going to give me an advantage next week? Like, I just never saw that from him. And the in-game stuff wasn't very good all the time. You hope that stuff can improve. But it's just the like overall philosophy of conservative football play that worries me a bit.
Yeah, the conservative thing is what I was not happy with either. But yeah, I mean, it's, part of it is you have to have belief in your team. You have to have belief in your coaching staff. And it seemed like there was a disconnect between him and Getsy. And of course, when the season ended, that was, the first big move. They got rid of the whole staff. They brought in a guy that runs a system that he talked about, that he loved so much when he was hired from the Bears in the first place. He's getting the system he thought he was getting when he hired Getsy, but now he's getting it from a guy that's done it for 3 years, as a play caller. Plus he's actually was right there with McVay and the Rams for so long. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this offense kind of turns around.
We got some, Chris asked how much I know we addressed it, but how much can you get for Braxton? And then Cornelius is like, no, don't do it. So I think that's exactly what we were kind of trying to wrestle with, is that, I don't necessarily want to deplete the depth either. And, you know what he is. He's a known quantity, and he's cost control for 2 years. Even if you do draft an offensive tackle, that there's still value there. And I mean, he's going to play some games, spot starts, for injury, or even plays when everybody's healthy. Like there'll be 6 offensive lineman plays that get put in. Personally, I think we need to see more of those. Just in football. More offensive linemen are better. All right. So I'm kind of there, but again, interesting scenario when you start pumping up the value of what that could potentially be worth. It starts to get interesting. There you go, Johnny Newton, right? Like, isn't that the Illinois guy?
Illinois guy, yeah. I mean, he's still rehabbing. I believe he tore his knee up. But yeah, I mean, him and the kid from Texas, Murphy, I believe it is. Those are the 2 consensus top guys. I think Newton may fall a little bit, but getting, like we said, getting that engine that runs the defense, I mean, that has to be something that Flus has in mind. And plus, at the end of the day, he's a defensive head coach. He wants guys that kind of can bolster what he does. And then he's the play caller too this coming up season. So yeah, he's going to probably want someone that kind of help out there at some point.
Wasn't that the whole sleuthing at the combine where they showed that clip and it was, oh man, if he's there, we're taking him. And I'm guaranteeing you that was a later round pick. It wasn't like a top guy, right? But
well, I also said we could use 2 of those.
Right. Moose is like, I'll take 2 of them. Yeah. Right. But I'm everybody went to like the top of the draft. Right. And it was sleuth that it was defensive ends. I just think that it was like a later pick that he was talking about. Just like, oh, if he's there, at that range, like we'll take him. Maybe it was a top pick. I don't know. But like, it just seems like they wouldn't put that out because we'd all sleuth what they were doing. So I think they were talking about like a mid-round pick or something like that. But
or if they would have put it out and then of course on Twitter, everyone right away, oh my God,
what were they wearing?
Find that clip. What were they wearing? That's the first thing I did. Are they wearing what they're wearing on the? So I think if it's the Bears, if it was something that would have tipped their hand, they would have deleted that clip by now.
That's what I'm saying. So to me, it was like they were referring to somebody later on. Yeah. Like a guy that they liked better than other people, right? And he's get the Bears sticker. I like this from Bruja 7. Close to a dozen picks next season. Do we? I don't know why people keep putting "we" in quotes. Trade some of that for a 2nd round pick this season. Let's just say day 2 pick. I've been trying to like put that out there. There's more ways to get capital in this draft, and it may be trading next year's capital into this. Now you're going to pay a premium.
Yeah.
Like you generally pay a round premium for that. So, if you want a 2nd rounder this year, that costs you a 1st rounder next year. So no, like I don't want that. But you go into the draft with the Panthers 2nd, which I think a lot of us think will be pretty high. And then if you're feeling yourself, if you think that you've got a good roster and you think that you're ready to go and you're willing to put your 2nd out there, right? And somebody doesn't think you're going to be very good, that may be where you get a little bit more value or have to pay less of a premium because you're like, we're going to pick in the 20s. And some other team might be like, yeah, this is going to be a high 2nd round pick. And so trading your 2nd round pick next year, to try to get into day 2, if some team kind of isn't interested or wants out, sure. But again, people like this top 3 rounds.
Yeah.
And then it all falls off a cliff apparently in round 5.
That's the buzz this year, that it's a top heavy draft. It's not quite as deep as years past. Part of it is the COVID years kind of had guys staying a little longer, which is why last year was such a good draft. The NIL money, there are some guys that are electing to stay because they don't have to turn pro. So I think that's going to affect drafts here in the future. So, we're in a different place. I mean, we have to see kind of how that NIL affects the draft going forward. And it's plus there's some talk about the conferences changing in college. So that's a lot of possible changes taking place that could affect the NFL draft in the long
run. Yeah, we got is this actually Jack? Or is
that's got to be? Oh, that's
just
Jack.
A super fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that clip of Ernie Adams on Edelman's podcast was pretty funny.
That's Jack's Substack shot on Elo. If you're a Bulls fan, subscribe to that. It's some awesome stuff. Goes right into your email box every week or so. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, and he had that great quote, or there was a clip on Twitter floating around from Ernie Adams about Manning and about how they ran cover 4 against Manning because everybody was running cover 1 and cover 2 and it wasn't working, or whatever, and they wanted to run cover 4. And then on the Manning cast, a couple of years ago, Manning was like, "Man, I hated going against cover 4 because I didn't like how my seams and I didn't like this." And Ernie Adams was like, "I knew it. That's why we did it." And just I love the passion of these football coaches that are it's so much more mental, than a lot of people give it credit for. There's so much mental energy that's put into football. And I think people think it's all, it's all strength and leverage. And it is, there's a lot of that, but it's also really smart people that are trying to figure out how to beat you, Monday through Saturday. And then Sunday, it all comes together.
Update on Newton. Yeah. Well, I think it was a foot injury, not a knee.
Yeah. Foot.
Yeah. Foot. Real quick. This one here. Harrison falls in 9. Buffalo calls with their first, second, future first. There are some mocks where Marvin Harrison has fallen to 9. Believe it or not, I have seen several. Again, it's the quarterbacks. If 4 quarterbacks sneak in early, and then now it's what's your flavor? If you're a team that already has a good X and you're going neighbors, and then all of a sudden the team needs a defensive end, unlikely, but man, every year, there's no way that happens.
That's true. That's true.
Sometimes it happens.
But there's 45 guys that are definite first rounders, that kind of thing.
For me in this situation, I don't know, man. I'd have to think about it. But Harrison's going to be a pretty good receiver, so I think the chance to pair up a blue chipper with your rookie quarterback, I think I'd turn that down. I think.
Yeah, I mean, personally, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Are those guys all going to be at the draft? Do we know which prospects are going to the draft yet?
I have not heard I know the league usually makes an announcement. I'm sure I'll get that press release at some point. When I do, I'll make sure I share that.
Okay. That'd be great. Hopefully I can get some quotes from 2.
Are you going to the draft this year?
I'm going to try to make it happen. So credential request is made. So.
Oh, nice. You got it. You got it locked in.
Yeah, I got to figure out some other stuff too. But yeah, that's the hope. Everything lines up and we can make it happen.
Nice.
So you ready to get out of here?
Let's get out of here. We have another podcast we have to record after this. So
yeah, short one though.
Short one, yeah.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back soon. Hopefully we'll get one more show in before the draft, maybe, but definitely after the draft when we'll hit those prospects hard. We'll definitely do something live on draft night too. So stick with us and for details on that, and we'll be hanging. So thanks everybody.